The Sahara stretched endlessly in every direction, a golden ocean of death under the merciless sun. Sarah clutched her swollen belly as her water ran out 3 hours ago, each step forward a gamble with her unborn child's life. Abandoned by her husband's family after they discovered her pregnancy wasn't his, she'd been left to die in this wasteland with nothing but the clothes on her back. But Sarah wasn't just any desperate woman. She was a former investigative journalist who'd exposed human trafficking rings across North Africa. She knew how to survive, how to read the signs others missed, and right now, those instincts were screaming that the gleaming mansion rising from the dunes ahead was impossible. Marble columns, crystal windows, manicured gardens fed by hidden springs. This wasn't some mirage. Someone had built paradise in hell itself. As she stumbled toward the ornate doors, Sarah noticed fresh tire tracks in the sand and security cameras disguised as decorative elements. Inside, the tables were set for dinner, still warm. Someone had been expecting her. But who knew she'd be here, and why did they want her alive? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's hand trembled as she pushed open the heavy mahogany door. Cool air rushed out to greet her, carrying the scent of jasmine and something else, something metallic that made her journalist instincts prickle with unease. The marble floor felt surreal beneath her sand-crusted feet as she stepped inside, leaving dusty footprints on the pristine surface. The foyer was magnificent, with a crystal chandelier casting rainbow prisms across cream-colored walls, adorned with priceless artwork. Persian rugs stretched across the floor, and fresh orchids bloomed in elaborate vases. But it was the dining room that stopped her cold, a long table set for 12, with steam still rising from covered silver platters. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but years of investigating dangerous stories had taught her caution. She approached the table slowly, noting the fine china bore no fingerprints, the wine glasses held no lipstick stains. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. A soft chime echoed through the mansion, and Sarah froze. Speakers she hadn't noticed crackled to life with a man's voice, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "Welcome home, Sarah. Please sit. You must be exhausted." Her blood turned to ice. The voice was familiar. She'd heard it before, but where? She spun around, searching for the source, her eyes cataloguing every corner, every shadow where someone might be hiding. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice hoarse from dehydration. "What do you want?" Gentle laughter floated through the speakers, such hostility from someone who should be grateful. "You were dying out there, carrying precious cargo, and I've provided sanctuary. The least you could do is show some appreciation." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly. 8 months pregnant, alone, and now trapped in a madman's playground. But she'd survived worse situations by keeping her wits about her. "I know who you are," she said, bluffing. It was an old interrogation technique. Let them think you know more than you do, and they might reveal themselves. "Do you? How delightful." The voice paused. "But I'm afraid you're not quite ready for that revelation. First, you need to understand why you're here." A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a television screen. Grainy security footage began to play. Sarah walking through a marketplace in Cairo 3 months ago. Sarah boarding a bus in Alexandria. Sarah arguing with her husband's brother outside the family compound. Someone had been watching her for months. "You've been tracking me." It wasn't a question. "Protecting you," the voice corrected. "You stumbled onto something in your last investigation, something that certain people would kill to keep buried. Your husband's family casting you out was convenient. It gave us the perfect opportunity to bring you somewhere safe." Sarah's mind raced back to her final story before discovering her pregnancy. She'd been investigating disappearances along the North African coast, young women vanishing without a trace. She'd gotten close to something big, but then morning sickness had derailed her focus, and personal drama had consumed her life. "The trafficking ring," she whispered. "Excellent." Excellent memory. You were closer than you knew to exposing an operation worth hundreds of millions. They couldn't risk letting you continue. A new image flashed on the screen, a photograph of her husband Ahmed shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit. Sarah's heart lurched. Ahmed wasn't just complicit in abandoning her, he'd been involved from the beginning. "Why save me?" she asked, sinking into one of the dining chairs as the weight of betrayal settled on her shoulders. "Because, my dear Sarah, you're going to help us destroy them all. But first, you're going to give birth to that child in safety and comfort. Consider this mansion your sanctuary and your prison." The speakers clicked off, leaving Sarah alone with her racing thoughts and the terrifying realization that she'd traded one nightmare for another. The mansion's front door opened at her touch, the heavy oak swinging inward with barely a whisper. Maya hesitated on the threshold, her hands still pressed against her rounded belly where the baby had finally settled into stillness. The silence that greeted her felt different from the oppressive heat outside, cooler, expectant, as if the house itself was holding its breath. "Hello?" Her voice echoed through what appeared to be a grand foyer, marble floors gleaming despite what should have been years of abandonment. "Is anyone here?" No response came, but Maya stepped inside anyway. The desperation that had driven her across 3 states wouldn't be deterred by an unlocked door and an inexplicable sense of being observed. Her water had run out 12 hours ago, and the cramping in her lower back suggested the baby might not wait much longer. The interior defied logic. Everything was pristine, too pristine for a house that should have been collecting desert dust for decades. Crystal chandelier teardrops caught the afternoon light streaming through tall windows, casting rainbow fragments across cream-colored walls adorned with oil paintings of landscapes she didn't recognize. The air smelled of lemon polish and something else, something floral and faint that reminded her uncomfortably of funeral homes. Maya's footsteps echoed as she moved deeper into the house, each room revealing the same impossible cleanliness. A sitting room with burgundy velvet furniture that looked freshly vacuumed, a dining room with a mahogany table set for 12, the silverware polished to mirrors. Most importantly, a kitchen that gleamed with modern appliances hidden behind vintage facades. She turned the tap at the kitchen sink, and clean, cold water flowed without hesitation. Maya cupped her hands, drinking greedily before splashing her face and neck. The relief was immediate, but it came with questions that made her skin crawl. Who was paying the water bill, the electric bill? The house hummed with central air conditioning that must have cost a fortune to run in this isolated location. Through the kitchen window, she could see her beat-up Honda in the circular driveway, looking like a rusty intrusion on an otherwise perfect scene. Beyond it, the desert stretched endlessly, heat waves still shimmering despite the approaching evening. No other vehicles, no tire tracks in the sand except her own, no neighbors for what had to be 50 miles in any direction. The refrigerator was stocked with fresh food, milk that wouldn't expire for another week, vegetables that were crisp and bright, a roasted chicken that looked like it had been purchased that morning. Maya's stomach growled, but she couldn't bring herself to take anything yet. The wrongness of the situation pressed against her consciousness like a physical weight. She opened cupboards and found them organized with military precision. Dishes arranged by size and color, pantry items with labels facing forward, nothing expired or even close to its date. In one drawer she discovered something that made her blood freeze, a stack of takeout menus, all local to the town she'd fled 3 days ago. The town where Marcus was probably still looking for her, still convinced he could force her to come home, still insisting the baby was his when she knew better. Maya's hands shook as she set the menus aside. It had to be a coincidence. Pizza places and Chinese restaurants all had similar designs, similar fonts. She was letting her paranoia overwhelm her logic. Marcus couldn't possibly know where she was. She'd paid cash for everything, avoided highways with traffic cameras, turned off her phone 50 miles outside the city limits. A sharp pain lanced through her lower back, and she gripped the counter until it passed. The baby shifted restlessly, as if responding to her elevated heart rate. She needed to calm down, needed to think practically. Whatever strange circumstances had led to this house being maintained in the middle of nowhere, she was here now, and she needed shelter. The alternative was spending the night in her car with no water and no air conditioning, gambling that she could make it to the next town before the baby decided to arrive. She climbed the main staircase, her hand trailing along a banister that had been polished to gleaming perfection. The second floor held 6 bedrooms, each one immaculate and ready for occupancy. She chose the one at the end of the hall, drawn by the view it offered of the surrounding desert. From here, she could see for miles in every direction. No one could approach without her knowledge. As she lowered herself onto the bed, which was not only made but turned down as if someone had been expecting, Maya tried to rationalize what she'd found. Maybe the house belonged to an eccentric millionaire who hired a service to maintain it. Maybe it was a vacation rental that just happened to be empty. Maybe she was overthinking everything because exhaustion and pregnancy hormones were making her paranoid. But as the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold, Maya caught a glint of light from a ridge about a mile away. Just a flash, like sunlight reflecting off glass, off binoculars perhaps, or a rifle scope. The bathroom mirror reflected a stranger back at her, hollow cheeks, dark circles beneath bloodshot eyes, and skin the color of parchment. Sarah splashed cold water on her face, watching the grime swirl down the pristine white sink. The water pressure was perfect, the temperature just right. Even the soap smelled expensive, like lavender and something else she couldn't identify. She pressed her palms against her belly, feeling the gentle flutter that had become her constant companion. "We're safe now," she whispered, though the words felt foreign on her tongue. Safety had been a luxury she'd forgotten existed. The towels were impossibly soft, Egyptian cotton if she had to guess. Everything in this place screamed wealth, the kind of money that could make problems disappear, the kind that built walls high enough to keep the world out or in. Downstairs, the kitchen was a study in modern perfection. Marble countertops gleamed under recessed lighting, and the refrigerator hummed quietly in the corner. Sarah opened it tentatively, half expecting to find nothing but expired condiments and disappointment. Instead, shelves lined with fresh produce, dairy, and enough food to last weeks greeted her. Her hands shook as she reached for a container of strawberries. When was the last time she'd eaten fruit? Real fruit, not the bruised apples she'd occasionally managed to afford. The first bite exploded with sweetness, juice running down her chin. She devoured 3 before forcing herself to stop, her stomach cramping from the sudden richness. As she explored the kitchen further, unease crept up her spine like cold fingers. Everything was too perfect, too ready. The bread was fresh. She could smell the yeast and warmth when she squeezed the loaf. Milk with an expiration date still a week away. Even the eggs looked like they'd been collected that morning. The rational part of her mind offered explanations. Maybe the owners had just left for vacation. Maybe they had a caretaker who kept things stocked. Maybe she'd stumbled onto some kind of corporate retreat center. But the irrational part, the part that had kept her alive on the streets for months, whispered warnings she tried to ignore. She made herself a simple sandwich, turkey and cheese on bread so soft it felt like eating clouds. Each bite was a small miracle, her body responding to real nutrition with grateful relief. The baby seemed to approve too, the fluttering in her belly settling into contentment. The dining room stretched before her, dominated by a table that could seat 12. Place settings sat ready, as if guests were expected at any moment. Crystal glasses caught the afternoon light streaming through tall windows, casting rainbow patterns on the walls. That's when she noticed the view. Beyond the manicured gardens and perfectly trimmed hedges, the landscape stretched endlessly in every direction. Not just empty, desolate. No neighboring houses dotted the horizon, no power lines, no roads except the one she'd stumbled down in her desperation. How far had she walked? The past few days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and determination. She remembered the bus station, the last of her money spent on a ticket to anywhere that wasn't the city. Then walking, always walking, when the bus route ended and her options narrowed to nothing. Sarah pressed her face against the cool glass, searching for any sign of civilization. In the distance, heat waves shimmered off what looked like sand dunes. The isolation was complete, total, and suddenly terrifying. A sound made her freeze, the soft whisper of fabric against fabric. She turned slowly, heart hammering against her ribs, but the room remained empty. Just shadows and silence, and the taste of fear creeping into her mouth. "Hello?" Her voice cracked. "Is someone there?" Nothing. But something had changed. She could feel it the way animals sense earthquakes before they strike. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Moving carefully, Sarah explored the ground floor room by room. A library lined with leather-bound books that looked like they'd never been opened. A sitting room with furniture positioned just so, cushions plumped and waiting. A study with a desk so clean it might have been polished moments ago. In the study, a single photograph sat in a silver frame, a woman with dark hair and kind eyes holding a baby. Sarah picked it up, studying the faces. The woman looked familiar somehow, though she was certain they'd never met. Something about the eyes, or maybe the smile. Behind her, floorboards creaked. Sarah spun around, photograph clutched to her chest. The hallway stretched empty, afternoon shadows growing longer as the sun began its descent. But she could swear she caught a glimpse of movement, just at the edge of her vision. "I know someone's there," she called out, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I'm not trespassing. I just need help. I'm pregnant and I have nowhere else to go." The silence that answered felt heavy with presence, with watching eyes and held breath. Sarah backed toward the front door, suddenly desperate for escape despite her exhaustion. But when she reached for the handle, it wouldn't turn. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight as Sarah descended the mahogany staircase, her bare feet silent against the polished wood. Sleep had proven impossible after finding that photograph, her mind churning with questions that seemed to multiply with each passing hour. The baby shifted restlessly within her, as if sensing her unease. She'd tried to dismiss what she'd seen. Perhaps it was merely a coincidence. Wealthy people often looked similar, shared certain refined features. But the woman's eyes haunted her, those familiar green eyes that stared back from her own mirror each morning. The kitchen beckoned, with its promise of warm milk and chamomile tea, anything to calm her nerves. As she rounded the corner into the spacious room, moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting geometric shadows across the marble countertops. She moved carefully in the darkness, not wanting to disturb the house's profound silence. A soft click made her freeze. The sound had come from somewhere behind her, near the service entrance she'd noticed earlier but hadn't explored. Sarah turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Nothing moved in the shadows, yet she couldn't shake the sensation of being observed. "Hello?" she whispered, immediately regretting the tremor in her voice. Silence answered back, thick and oppressive. She fumbled for the light switch, flooding the kitchen with warm yellow illumination. Everything appeared exactly as she'd left it after dinner. Pristine, untouched, normal. But the service door stood slightly ajar. Sarah was certain it had been closed when she'd prepared her evening meal. She approached it cautiously, noting how the well-oiled hinges made no sound as she pushed it open. Beyond lay a narrow corridor she hadn't noticed during her earlier exploration, leading deeper into the house's hidden arteries. The smart thing would be to return to her room, to wait until daylight before investigating further. But something pulled her forward, a need to understand this place that had become her sanctuary, yet felt increasingly like a beautiful trap. The corridor stretched longer than the house's exterior dimensions should have allowed. Doors lined both sides, most bearing small brass nameplates too tarnished to read in the dim light, filtering from the kitchen behind her. She pressed her ear to the first door, hearing nothing but the whisper of her own breathing. The handle turned easily. The room beyond was small, clearly servants' quarters from an earlier era. A narrow bed sat beneath a single window, its frame draped with dust sheets. But it was the wall that made her breath catch. Dozens of photographs pinned in neat rows, all showing the same woman. The same woman from the library, the same woman whose face could have been Sarah's own. She stepped closer, her pulse thundering in her ears. The photograph spanned what appeared to be several decades, showing the woman at different ages, in different clothes, but always with those distinctive green eyes. In some images, she was clearly pregnant, her belly round with promise. In the final photograph, she was gone. Only a grave marker remained, stark against the desert landscape. Sarah squinted at the inscription, but the image was too faded, the writing too small to decipher from her position. "You weren't supposed to find this room." Sarah spun around, a scream caught in her throat. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, tall, lean, wearing clothes that seemed to belong to another century. In the dim light, she couldn't make out facial features, but she sensed eyes studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "I'm sorry," she managed, backing against the photo-covered wall. "I couldn't sleep, and I heard a noise." "The resemblance is remarkable," the figure interrupted, stepping into the room. Now she could see him more clearly, a man perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and clothes that belonged in a Victorian novel, even more striking than I anticipated. "Who are you?" Sarah's hand instinctively moved to protect her belly. "What is this place?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I am Thomas Blackwood, and this has been my family's home for generations. As for what this place is," he gestured at the photographs surrounding them, "it is a sanctuary for women like yourself, women who find themselves in desperate circumstances, carrying precious cargo. Women like me? Pregnant, alone, with nowhere else to turn." His gaze dropped meaningfully to her rounded stomach. "You're not the first to seek shelter here, Sarah, and you won't be the last." The casual use of her name sent ice through her veins. She'd never told him her name, never spoken to him before this moment. "How do you know who you are?" Thomas Blackwood's smile widened. "My dear girl, I've been expecting you for quite some time. Your arrival was not the coincidence you believe it to be." The photographs seemed to press closer around her, dozens of green eyes staring with mute accusation. In the distance, she could swear she heard the whisper of shifting sand. The baby kicked hard against Maya's ribs as she stood frozen in the hallway, her hand still gripping the brass doorknob. The photograph trembled in her other hand, her own face staring back at her from what looked like a hospital bed, her belly rounded with pregnancy. But she had no memory of this place, this moment captured in time. Footsteps echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. Maya's breath caught. She wasn't alone. The footsteps were measured, deliberate, moving closer. Maya pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she was certain it could be heard throughout the mansion. The photograph fluttered to the floor as she searched frantically for somewhere to hide, but the hallway stretched endlessly in both directions with nowhere to go. A shadow appeared at the far end of the corridor. "I wondered when you'd find that room," a woman's voice called out, warm and familiar in a way that made Maya's skin crawl. "You always were curious, even as a child." Maya squinted into the dim light as the figure approached. An elderly woman emerged from the shadows, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, wearing a cream-colored dress that seemed to shimmer in the filtered sunlight. Her face was kind, lined with age but beautiful, and her eyes held a depth of knowledge that made Maya want to run. "Who are you?" Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper. "How do you know me?" The woman smiled, and something cold settled in Maya's stomach. "My dear child, I'm Dr. Helena Ravencroft. I've been caring for you for quite some time." She gestured toward Maya's belly. "Caring for both of you? That's impossible. I've never seen you before in my life. Haven't you?" Dr. Ravencroft bent gracefully and picked up the fallen photograph, studying it with the fondness one might reserve for a treasured family portrait. "Your memory has been fragmented lately. The stress of pregnancy, you understand. It's perfectly normal." Maya backed away, her shoulder blades hitting the wall. "You're lying. I remember everything. I was traveling, my car broke down. I walked here." "From where, dear?" The doctor's voice remained maddeningly gentle. "What's the last thing you remember before finding this house?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to answer and found nothing. No memory of where she'd been traveling to or from, no recollection of the car breaking down, though she distinctly remembered walking. The harder she tried to grasp the memories, the more they seemed to slip away like water through her fingers. I can't," Maya's voice broke. "It's all right, sweetheart. Memory loss is common in cases like yours. That's why I've been documenting everything so carefully." Dr. Ravencroft held up the photograph. "Every milestone, every moment. So you won't forget again." The baby kicked again, more urgently this time, and Maya gasped, doubling over slightly. Dr. Ravencroft was beside her instantly, her hands surprisingly strong as they supported Maya's weight. "The little one is active today," she murmured, and Maya jerked away from her touch as if burned. "Don't touch me." "Maya, please. I'm a doctor. I've been monitoring your pregnancy for months now. Everything is proceeding beautifully." Her eyes gleamed with something that wasn't quite maternal pride. "The baby is going to be perfect." "Months?" The word escaped Maya's lips like a sob. "What are you talking about? I don't know you. I've never been here before." Dr. Ravencroft sighed, the sound heavy with what appeared to be genuine sadness. "This is why I hoped you wouldn't find that room quite yet. These episodes are becoming more frequent." She reached into her dress pocket and withdrew a small white pill. "This will help clear your mind." Maya stared at the pill with growing horror. "You've been drugging me." "Medicating you, dear. There's a difference." Dr. Ravencroft's tone remained patient, as if she were speaking to a confused child. "You came to me in such a state, malnourished, delusional, rambling about people chasing you. Do you remember that? The men who were after you?" Images flashed through Maya's mind. Dark figures in expensive suits, the acrid smell of fierce sweat, running through an alley with sirens wailing in the distance. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly. "How do you know about that?" "Because you told me, sweetheart. You begged me to help you, to keep you safe until the baby came." Dr. Ravencroft stepped closer, the pill still extended. "And that's exactly what I've been doing, keeping you both safe." The mansion suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in around Maya. The beautiful rooms, the stocked kitchen, the comfortable bed. It wasn't sanctuary. It was a cage, and she was the prize bird, carefully tended and watched, waiting for something she couldn't yet understand. "What do you want with my baby?" Dr. Ravencroft's smile never wavered, but something shifted behind her eyes. Something hungry. "Why, dear child, I want to help you bring a miracle into the world." The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if responding to the surge of adrenaline coursing through Maya's veins. She pressed her back against the bathroom door, listening for any sound from the hallway beyond. The silence felt thick, oppressive, like the air before a storm. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone again, checking the bars that weren't there, willing them to appear. Nothing. The device might as well have been a paperweight in this technological dead zone. She forced herself to breathe slowly, counting each inhale and exhale the way her prenatal instructor had taught her. Panic wouldn't help the baby, and it certainly wouldn't get her out of this house. Moving carefully, she cracked open the bathroom door and peered into the hallway. Empty. The Persian runner stretched before her, leading back toward the staircase. But something was different now. A door that had been closed earlier, third one on the right, stood slightly ajar. She was certain it had been shut tight when she'd first explored the upstairs. Maya's mouth went dry. Someone was definitely in the house. She needed to get downstairs, grab her backpack, and leave immediately. The car might not start, but walking back to the main road was better than staying here another minute. Her bare feet made no sound on the hardwood as she crept toward the stairs, avoiding the floorboards that had creaked earlier. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed 5 times, the sound echoing through the house like a funeral bell. Maya paused at the top of the staircase, scanning the foyer below. Everything appeared exactly as she'd left it. her backpack by the front door, the crystal chandelier casting rainbow fragments across the marble floor, the fresh flowers in their crystal vase. Those flowers. They nagged at her consciousness as she descended the stairs. White roses, baby's breath, eucalyptus. The arrangement looked professionally done, the kind of thing you'd see in a high-end hotel or gallery. But who was maintaining this place? Who had replaced the flowers so recently that they still held perfect form? Halfway down the staircase, Maya heard it. The soft whisper of fabric against fabric, coming from somewhere deeper in the house. She froze, one hand gripping the banister, the other instinctively protecting her belly. The sound came again, followed by what might have been footsteps on carpet. Her original plan of simply grabbing her bag and leaving suddenly seemed impossibly naive. If someone was in the house, they would see her the moment she crossed the foyer. The front door might as well have been on the moon. Maya changed direction, moving silently back up several steps until she could see into the living room through the archway. A figure moved past the doorway, just a shadow, there and gone so quickly she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. But the scent that followed was unmistakable, expensive cologne with notes of sandalwood and cedar. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't some vagrant who'd found shelter in an abandoned house. This was someone who belonged here, someone who moved through these rooms with familiarity and purpose. The baby shifted restlessly, as if picking up on her distress. Maya placed both hands on her stomach, trying to send calm thoughts to the life growing inside her. Whatever happened next, she had to protect them both. A new sound drifted from the kitchen, the gentle clink of china, the whisper of liquid being poured. Someone was making tea. The domesticity of it sent a chill down Maya's spine that had nothing to do with the house's air conditioning. Who made tea while an intruder wandered their home? Unless they knew she was here, unless they'd been expecting her. The thought hit her like a physical blow. The unlocked door, the prepared rooms, the fresh flowers and stocked pantry, the convenient breakdown of her car just as she'd spotted this house through the trees. How many miles had she driven on back roads before finding this place? How many turns had she taken, following what she'd thought were random impulses? Maya's breathing grew shallow as the pieces clicked together. She hadn't stumbled upon this house by accident. She'd been guided here, led like a lamb to slaughter. But why? What could anyone possibly want with a broke, pregnant woman fleeing an abusive relationship? The footsteps were moving again, coming closer to the foyer. Maya retreated further up the staircase, pressing herself against the wall where the banister would hide her from view below. Through the spindles, she watched a figure enter the foyer. It was a woman, middle-aged, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. She wore a cream-colored dress that looked like it cost more than Maya made in a month, and pearl earrings that caught the light from the chandelier. She moved with the easy grace of someone completely at home, pausing to adjust one of the white roses in the crystal vase. The woman looked up then, her gaze traveling directly to where Maya crouched on the stairs. Their eyes met through the banister spindles, and the woman smiled. "Hello, dear," she said, her voice carrying the warmth of a beloved grandmother. "I've been waiting for you." The pregnancy test sat on the marble bathroom counter like an accusation. 3 months. The dates didn't align with her memories of this place, yet the evidence was undeniable. Maya's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the sink, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her skin held a pallor that seemed to match the mansion's ethereal glow. She had been here longer than she thought possible. The realization crept through her mind like ice water, carrying with it fragments of lost time. Days that blurred together in golden light, nights that passed without dreams, meals that appeared and disappeared without her preparing them. The pregnancy symptoms she had attributed to stress and poor nutrition now took on a sinister quality. The baby moved inside her, a flutter that felt both foreign and familiar. How could she not remember 3 months of her own life? How could she not remember the father? Maya stumbled from the bathroom, her bare feet silent on the cool floor. The mansion felt different now, its beauty tainted with something she couldn't name. The walls seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, and she found herself pressing her palm against one, feeling for a heartbeat that wasn't there. In the kitchen, she opened cabinet after cabinet, searching for something she couldn't identify. Behind jars of honey and preserved fruits, her fingers found a small leather journal wedged between two shelves. The binding was worn, the pages yellowed with age. She pulled it free and opened it to the first entry. The handwriting was hers, but she had no memory of forming these words. Day 1, found the mansion. Safe at last. The baby will be safe here. Day 15, dreams are getting stronger. Someone is singing lullabies in languages I don't recognize. Day 32, found the room downstairs. Shouldn't have gone down there. The photographs. God, the photographs. Day 45, he watches from the mirrors. I pretend I don't see him, but he knows I know. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The handwriting grew more erratic with each entry, the words sometimes trailing off mid-sentence or dissolving into illegible scrawl. She flipped through the pages, finding sketches of symbols that hurt to look at directly and pressed flowers that crumbled to dust at her touch. Day 67, the other women visit at night. They show me their babies. Such beautiful babies. They never cry. Day 78, I remember now. I remember what happened before, what I did, what was done to me. The golden sand knows everything. Day 89, tomorrow I'll try to leave again. I know I won't make it past the garden. I know I'll forget again. But maybe this journal will remember for me. The final entry was dated yesterday, written in a hand so shaky it was barely legible. Day 94, the baby is almost ready. He's so excited, says this one will be perfect, says I was chosen. The desert brought me here for a reason. Maya dropped the journal as if it had burned her. The baby kicked hard, responding to her surge of terror. She backed away from the kitchen counter, her mind reeling. The mansion suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. She could taste metal and honey on her tongue. From somewhere in the depths of the house came the sound of footsteps, measured and deliberate. Maya had never heard them before, but somehow she knew their rhythm intimately. They echoed off the walls with purpose, growing closer with each passing second. She ran toward the front door, her pregnant body clumsy and unbalanced. The handle turned easily in her grasp, but the door wouldn't budge. She threw her shoulder against it, panic rising in her throat like bile. Through the glass panels, she could see the desert stretching endlessly under the afternoon sun, but it might as well have been another world. The footsteps had reached the main hallway. Maya pressed herself against the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could hear her own breathing, ragged and desperate, and underneath it, something else, humming. A low, melodic sound that made her teeth ache and her vision blur. The voice was gentle, familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. Come away from the door, sweetheart. You know it won't open. She turned slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to keep running. A man stood at the end of the hallway, tall and lean with kind eyes and silver hair. He wore a simple white shirt and dark trousers, looking for all the world like someone's beloved grandfather. But Maya knew better now. The journal had shown her the truth she had forgotten 94 times. You're not ready to leave yet, he said, taking a step closer. The baby needs more time. You need more time to remember why you came here, why you chose this. The golden light streaming through the window seemed to pulse with his words, and Maya felt her panic beginning to ebb despite herself. Her hand moved protectively to her belly as the mansion's strange peace settled over her like a shroud. The basement door stood ajar, revealing nothing but impenetrable darkness beyond. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she gripped the flashlight she'd found in the kitchen drawer. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to pretend she'd never seen the strange symbols carved into the floorboards upstairs, never noticed how the house seemed to breathe around her at night. But the answers were down there. She could feel them pulling at her like a tide. The wooden steps groaned under her weight as she descended, each creak echoing in the hollow space below. The air grew colder with every step, carrying a metallic scent that made her stomach churn. Her free hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby had been unusually still all morning. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing stone walls that looked far older than the house above. They were rough-hewn, ancient, with more of those disturbing symbols etched deep into the rock. Some looked like they'd been carved recently, the stone still pale where the chisel had bitten. Others were weathered smooth, as if they'd been here for centuries. At the bottom of the stairs, Sarah found herself in a narrow corridor that stretched beyond the reach of her light. The floor was packed earth, hard as concrete beneath her feet. She moved forward slowly, the beam dancing across the walls, illuminating fragments of the larger picture, spirals that seemed to move in her peripheral vision, crude figures with too many limbs, and everywhere that same angular symbol she'd seen in her room. The corridor opened into a circular chamber, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, thumbtacked in overlapping layers, some so old they'd yellowed and curled at the edges. Women, all of them pregnant, all of them standing in front of this very house. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she raised the flashlight. The photos spanned decades, maybe longer. The clothing changed, hairstyles evolved, but the expressions remained eerily consistent. Hope mixed with exhaustion, relief tinged with something that looked like fear. In the center of the far wall, one photograph was mounted in an ornate silver frame. A woman with Sarah's exact shade of auburn hair stood on the mansion's front porch, one hand on her swollen belly, the other shading her eyes as she squinted into the camera. The resemblance was so striking that for a moment Sarah wondered if she was looking at some impossible photo of herself. But the woman's clothes were from another era. A simple cotton dress that hung loose over her pregnant form, sturdy leather shoes caked with dust. At the bottom of the frame, elegant script read, "Elena Morrison, 1952. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. Morrison, her maiden name. Beautiful, isn't she? Sarah spun around, the flashlight beam wild and erratic. A figure emerged from the shadows at the chamber's entrance, tall, angular, with silver hair that caught the light like spun metal. His eyes were the pale blue of winter sky, and when he smiled, Sarah felt ice in her veins. "I've been waiting for you to find this place," he said, stepping into the circle of photographs. "Though I must admit you took longer than most. Elena found it her first night." "Who are you?" Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. "A caretaker of sorts. A guardian of traditions that stretch back farther than this house, farther than these walls." He gestured to the photographs surrounding them. "Each of these women came here for the same reason you did. Desperate, alone, carrying something precious. They came here by accident, like I did." His laugh was soft, almost fond. "Oh, my dear. Nothing that happens here is an accident. The house calls to those who carry the gift. It always has." Sarah backed toward the wall, her spine pressing against the cold stone. "What gift?" "Life," he said simply. "Pure, untainted life, the kind that can bridge the gap between what was and what will be." His gaze dropped to her belly. "You've felt it, haven't you? The way your child responds to this place, how still and quiet it becomes when you're here." She had felt it. The constant movement that had marked her pregnancy had ceased the moment she'd crossed the threshold. At first, she'd been worried, but the baby's heartbeat remained strong during her daily checks with the fetal monitor she'd found in the nursery. "What did you do to them?" She nodded toward the photographs. "What happened to these women?" "They fulfilled their purpose," he said, "just as you will." The flashlight flickered, and in that moment of wavering light, Sarah saw something that made her blood freeze. Behind the man, the shadows were moving, taking shape. Figures emerged from the darkness, women in outdated clothing, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes fixed on Sarah with expressions of profound sadness. Elena Morrison stepped forward from among them, her 1950 seconds dress now faded and torn, her pregnant belly somehow hollow. When she opened her mouth to speak, no sound came out, but Sarah could read her lips perfectly. Run. The basement door stood ajar, exhaling cool, stale air that carried the metallic scent of old machinery and something else, something organic and unsettling. Sarah's flashlight beam trembled as she descended the wooden stairs, each step groaning under her weight. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her mounting anxiety. The basement stretched further than the mansion's footprint should have allowed, carved deep into the sandstone beneath. Support beams disappeared into shadows, and the walls were lined with shelving units containing glass jars filled with cloudy liquid. Sarah forced herself not to look too closely at the floating shapes inside. Her light caught something glinting in the far corner, a metal table, surgical in its sterility, surrounded by equipment that belonged in a hospital, not a basement. Monitors, 4 stands, and devices she couldn't identify hummed with electrical life despite the mansion's supposed abandonment. Fresh wheel marks scored the dusty floor leading to and from the table. A manila folder lay open beside one of the monitors. Sarah's hands shook as she lifted it, her flashlight illuminating page after page of medical records, names, dates, procedures, all documenting pregnancies. The photographs made her stomach lurch, women in various stages of pregnancy, all bearing an uncanny resemblance to her. Same dark hair, same build, same desperate eyes. The most recent entry was dated 3 days ago. The photograph showed a woman who could have been Sarah's twin lying on the very table before her. The notation at the bottom read, Subject 47, extraction complete, viability 100%, host disposed. Sarah's knees buckled. She caught herself against the table's edge, her breathing coming in sharp gasps. 47. There had been 46 women before her, all led here, all trusting in their desperation. The baby's movements intensified, and she pressed her hand to her belly protectively. A soft whirring sound made her freeze. One of the monitors was activating, its screen flickering to life. Green text scrolled across the display, Subject 48. Vital signs, elevated heart rate, increased adrenaline, recommended sedation protocol initiated. The ventilation system hissed, and Sarah caught the sweet scent of something being pumped into the air. Her vision blurred at the edges, and she stumbled toward the stairs, fighting the growing lethargy in her limbs. Behind her, more equipment activated with electronic chirps and beeps. She hauled herself up the basement steps, her legs heavy as lead weights. The kitchen spun around her as she emerged, and she gripped the doorframe to steady herself. The house felt different now, alive with hidden mechanisms and watching eyes. The pristine surfaces weren't welcoming, they were sterile, prepared for what was to come. Through the kitchen window, she saw movement in the desert. Dark figures approached across the sand, their shapes becoming clearer as they drew near. 3 people in white coats, moving with purpose and precision. The doctor from the gas station walked among them, his kind demeanor replaced by cold professionalism. Sarah forced her drugged limbs to move, stumbling through the living room toward the front door. The beautiful furnishings blurred past her in a haze of panic and pharmaceutical fog. She reached for the door handle and found it locked, not just locked, but sealed with some electronic mechanism that blinked red when she touched it. The back door yielded the same result. Every window was similarly secured, the glass reinforced and unbreakable. The mansion wasn't a sanctuary, it was a trap, perfectly baited and triggered by her arrival. Footsteps echoed on the front porch. The doctor's voice carried through the walls, calm and clinical. Vitals look good from here. The sedative should have her compliant but conscious. We need her awareness for the bonding process. This one's further along than the others, a woman's voice replied. The timeline might be accelerated. Even better, the client has been very patient. Sarah's mind reeled. Client. They were selling the babies, or worse, preparing them for something she couldn't fathom. The similarities between all the women weren't coincidental. They were being selected, hunted, gathered like specimens for some horrific purpose. The front door's electronic lock disengaged with a soft click. Sarah forced herself to move, climbing the stairs to the second floor on unsteady legs. The sedative pulled at her consciousness, but maternal instinct drove her forward. She had to find another way out, had to protect her child from whatever fate had claimed the other 47. Behind her, voices filled the mansion. Equipment wheeled across hardwood floors with efficient precision. They were setting up, preparing for procedures she didn't want to imagine. The second-floor hallway stretched before her, lined with doors she hadn't explored. Her flashlight beam wavered as she tried each handle, finding most locked. But the last door, a narrow entrance at the hall's end, opened to reveal a steep staircase leading up. The tower. From outside, she'd seen it rising above the mansion's main structure. If there was another way out, another way down, it might be her only chance. The voices below grew closer as she began to climb, each step a battle against the drugs coursing through her system and the weight of her unborn child. The baby's movements had become erratic, sharp jabs that left Maya gasping and clutching her swollen belly. She'd been pacing the mansion's halls for hours, unable to shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in the house's atmosphere. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't name, and every shadow felt pregnant with menace. Dr. Reeves hadn't returned since their conversation about the other women. His absence stretched like a wound through the silence, making every creak of the floorboards sound like footsteps that never materialized into a person. The nursery door stood ajar at the end of the hallway, a sliver of pale light spilling across the Persian runner. Maya found herself drawn to it despite her growing unease. Inside, the rocking chair swayed gently in a breeze she couldn't feel, its rhythmic motion hypnotic and wrong. She pressed her hand against the cool glass of the window, staring out at the endless expanse of golden sand. The desert stretched to every horizon, unmarked by roads or paths that might explain how she'd found this place. How had the GPS led her here when there was clearly no route? The question had been gnawing at her for days, but now it felt urgent, demanding. A soft chiming sound drifted from somewhere below. Maya froze, listening. It came again, delicate, like wind chimes or distant bells. Following the sound, she made her way downstairs, her hand trailing along the mahogany banister. The chiming led her to a door she hadn't noticed before, tucked beneath the main staircase. The wood was darker than the rest of the house, almost black, with brass hinges that gleamed despite their obvious age. Maya's fingers found the handle before her mind could protest. The door opened onto a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. Cool air rushed up to meet her, carrying scents of earth and something else, something organic and cloying that made her stomach turn. The chiming was clearer now, echoing up from the depths like a summons. Maya knew she shouldn't go down there. Every instinct screamed against it. But the baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if urging her forward, and she found herself taking the first step. The wooden stairs were smooth and well-maintained, unlike the rest of the house's carefully orchestrated imperfections. Someone had spent time here recently. The walls on either side were carved stone, rough-hewn and ancient-looking, as if this part of the structure predated the mansion above by centuries. At the bottom, Maya emerged into a circular chamber lit by oil lamps mounted in iron brackets. The chiming came from dozens of small bells suspended from the ceiling on nearly invisible threads. They moved constantly, stirring the air with their gentle music. But it was what lay in the center of the room that stole Maya's breath. 5 stone platforms rose from the floor, each one bearing a wooden coffin. The wood was pristine, unmarked by age or decay. Fresh flowers adorned each coffin, roses, lilies, baby's breath, their perfume mixing with the earthy smell to create something both beautiful and nauseating. Maya approached the nearest platform on trembling legs. A brass nameplate was mounted at the head of the coffin: Sarah Chen, age 23, mother to Jacob. The next read, Elena Rodriguez, age 19, mother to Sophia. Her hands shook as she read each name. Young women, all of them, all mothers. The dates carved beneath their names revealed they had died within the last 5 years, each death occurring in late pregnancy or shortly after birth. The 5th platform was empty, its stone surface polished to a mirror shine. Waiting. Maya backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. The baby writhed inside her as if sensing her terror. This wasn't a house, it was a tomb, a carefully maintained shrine to women who had come here seeking refuge and found only death. Dr. Reeves' words echoed in her memory. "You're exactly what this place needs, not what she needed, what the place needed." Another offering for whatever hungry darkness dwelt beneath the golden sands. She turned to flee but froze as footsteps echoed on the stairs above. Slow, measured, descending. Dr. Reeves's voice drifted down, humming a lullaby that made her skin crawl. Maya looked around desperately for another exit, but there was none. The chamber was a dead end, a trap disguised as sanctuary. The bells chimed more urgently now, as if responding to her fear. The footsteps grew closer. In the lamplight, shadows danced across the stone walls like specters of the dead women, reaching out to welcome their newest sister. Maya pressed herself against the cold stone, one hand protectively covering her belly, and waited for Dr. Reeves to appear. The humming stopped. In the sudden silence, Maya could hear only the whisper of the bells and the frantic beating of her own heart. The trapdoor's hinges groaned like wounded animals as Sarah descended into the suffocating darkness below. Each wooden step creaked under her weight, the sound echoing in the confined space like gunshots. The musty air grew thicker with every breath, heavy with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic that made her stomach lurch. Her phone's flashlight beam cut through the blackness, revealing rough stone walls that seemed to press closer with each step. The staircase was older than the mansion above, carved from bedrock that predated any civilized settlement in this desolate region. Water stains streaked the walls like tears, and in some places dark patches that looked disturbingly like handprints marked the stone. 23 steps down, the staircase ended at a narrow corridor that stretched beyond her light's reach. The ceiling was so low she had to duck, her pregnant belly brushing against the cold stone. The sensation sent chills through her already trembling body. "Hello?" she called softly, though every instinct screamed at her to remain silent. Her voice was swallowed by the oppressive darkness, returning no echo, as if the very air absorbed sound. She moved forward, one careful step at a time, sweeping the light from side to side. The corridor branched into 3 separate passages, each one disappearing into impenetrable shadow. Above her head she could hear the mansion settling, wood beams creaking with familiar sounds that now seemed ominous from below. Sarah chose the middle passage, following what felt like a slight upward draft. The walls here were different, smoother, deliberately carved rather than roughly hewn. Someone had spent considerable time and effort creating this underground network. But why? The passage opened into a circular chamber, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The room was a shrine to obsession. Dozens of photographs covered every inch of the walls, all of them showing the same woman at different ages. A little girl with pigtails playing in a garden, a teenager in a graduation cap, a young woman in a wedding dress beaming at the camera. And then the photos changed. The same woman but different, hollow-eyed, frightened, running, looking over her shoulder with terror etched across her features. Sarah's hands shook as she moved closer to examine the images. In the corner of each photo, a date was meticulously written in red ink. The progression spanned decades, chronicling what appeared to be a systematic hunt. The final photograph showed the woman heavily pregnant, standing in front of a gas station, one hand protectively cradling her belly. The woman looked exactly like Sarah, she whispered, stepping backward. The light trembled in her grip, casting dancing shadows across the grotesque gallery. This isn't possible. But the evidence surrounded her. Photo after photo of a woman who could have been her twin, or her mother, or herself from another life. The facial structure, the hair, even the way she stood. Everything was identical down to the smallest detail. A new sound reached her ears from deeper in the chamber, the soft scraping of metal against stone. Sarah spun toward the noise, her light revealing another passage she hadn't noticed before. The scraping came again, rhythmic and deliberate. like someone sharpening a blade. She knew she should run. Every survival instinct told her to flee back up those stairs and out of this nightmare mansion. But her feet carried her forward, drawn by a horrible fascination and the desperate need for answers. The passage led to a second chamber, larger than the first. Ancient filing cabinets lined the walls, their metal drawers labeled with dates going back over a century. In the center of the room sat a desk covered with papers, maps, and what appeared to be genealogical charts. Red lines connected names and dates in an intricate web that hurt her eyes to follow. Sarah approached the desk with mounting dread. The topmost paper was a birth certificate dated 9 months from today. The name read, Baby Whitmore, and the mother's name was her own. You weren't supposed to find this yet. The voice came from behind her, calm and measured. Sarah spun around, her light illuminating the figure of Dr. Reeves standing in the doorway. But he looked different now. His kind demeanor had evaporated, replaced by something cold and calculating. The photos, she gasped. That woman. Your grandmother. And before her, your great-grandmother. He stepped into the chamber, his eyes reflecting her phone's light like an animal's. The Whitmore bloodline has been special to my family for generations. We've been its guardians, its shepherds, ensuring the continuation of something very important. Sarah's back pressed against the desk. You're insane. Am I? He smiled, and she saw that his teeth had been filed to points. Your child carries something precious, Sarah, something that's been passed down through your maternal line for over 200 years. My ancestors made a pact, and I intend to honor it. The metal scraping sound resumed, and Sarah realized with growing horror that it was coming from Dr. Reeves himself, his fingernails dragging against the stone walls as he advanced. The basement stretched deeper than Sarah had imagined possible. What she'd thought was a simple cellar revealed itself as an elaborate underground complex, its walls lined with the same pristine white tiles as the mansion above. But down here, some tiles bore dark stains that no amount of scrubbing could erase. Her flashlight beam danced across a series of reinforced doors, each bearing a small window at eye level. The first room contained nothing but a hospital bed, its restraints still buckled as if waiting for the next patient. The second held filing cabinets filled with medical records dating back decades. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled out folder after folder, each containing detailed documentation of pregnancies, births, and adoptions. But it was the photographs that made her stomach lurch. Women in various stages of pregnancy, all bearing the same hollow expression she recognized from her own mirror. Some looked young, barely out of their teens. Others appeared older, desperate, their eyes holding the same haunted quality that had driven Sarah to this place. At the bottom of each photo, dates were written in careful script, along with initials and what appeared to be payment amounts. Inventory, she whispered, understanding flooding through her like ice water. The third room contained equipment that belonged in a delivery ward, but the leather restraints and soundproofing material on the walls suggested something far more sinister. Sarah backed away, her baby shifting restlessly as her heart rate spiked. A soft sound echoed from deeper in the complex. Footsteps, measured and deliberate. Sarah killed her flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, listening. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by a low humming that raised the hair on her neck. She recognized the tune, the same lullaby that had been playing on the music box upstairs. Through the darkness, a warm glow approached. Dr. Hartwell emerged from the shadows carrying an old-fashioned oil lamp, her serene expression unchanged despite the surroundings. I was wondering when you'd find your way down here, she said conversationally. You're more resourceful than most. That's why you were chosen. Chosen for what? Sarah's voice cracked. The same thing all the others were chosen for, dear. To complete the circle. Dr. Hartwell set the lamp on a small table, casting dancing shadows on the walls. This house has served its purpose for nearly 60 years. My grandmother started the work. My mother continued it, and now it falls to me. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The women in those photos provided a service. Just as you will. Dr. Hartwell's smile never wavered. Wealthy families desperate for children, young women with nowhere else to turn. It's really quite beautiful when you think about it. Everyone gets what they need. And if the women refuse? Dr. Hartwell's expression flickered, showing something cold beneath the maternal facade. That rarely happens. By the time they arrive here, they understand there are no other options. The desert has a way of clarifying one's priorities. Sarah thought of the GPS device, the convenient breakdown of her car, the perfectly timed appearance of this sanctuary. You brought me here. Somehow you orchestrated all of this. Not just me. We have associates who identify suitable candidates. Women with no family connections, no support systems, no one who would come looking. Dr. Hartwell moved closer, and Sarah caught a whiff of antiseptic and something metallic. You made it so easy, dear, posting online about your situation, your desperation. We simply provided gentle guidance. The baby kicked hard against Sarah's ribs, as if sensing the danger. She wrapped her arms protectively around her belly. I won't let you take my child. Your child? Dr. Hartwell laughed softly. Darling, you signed that away the moment you walked through our door. The adoption papers are already prepared. A lovely family in Switzerland has been waiting for months. Sarah's hand found the heavy flashlight at her side. What happens to the mothers? The silence stretched between them, more damning than any words. Some adapt to their new circumstances, Dr. Hartwell said finally. Others find the transition more challenging. Sarah understood. The desert sand outside could hide so many secrets. Now then, Dr. Hartwell continued, reaching into her medical bag, let's get you settled. The procedure will be much easier if you don't fight it. The syringe gleamed in the lamplight, filled with something that promised oblivion. Sarah gripped the flashlight tighter, her muscles coiling for action. She had one chance, one moment before Dr. Hartwell got close enough to use that needle. Her baby shifted again, and this time it felt different. Urgent. A warm wetness spread between her legs, and Sarah realized with a mixture of terror and hope that her body had chosen this moment to begin what it had been preparing for all along. The baby's coming, she gasped, doubling over as the first real contraction seized her. Dr. Hartwell's eyes lit up with predatory satisfaction. Perfect timing. Let's get you upstairs to the delivery room. The basement stretched deeper than Clara had imagined possible, carved from the same golden sandstone that formed the mansion's foundation. Her flashlight beam danced across walls lined with shelves, each one holding glass jars filled with murky liquid. As she moved closer, her stomach lurched when she realized what floated inside them. Tissue samples, organs, and in the largest jar at eye level, something that made her blood freeze. A perfectly formed fetus, no bigger than her thumb. "Oh, God," she whispered, her free hand instinctively moving to her belly. The baby kicked as if sensing her distress. Behind the specimens, yellowed photographs were tacked to the wall, black and white images of pregnant women in various stages of their pregnancies, all taken without their knowledge. Some were sleeping, others cooking, a few were reading. Clara recognized the angles. These had been taken through windows from hidden vantage points. At the bottom of each photo, dates were written in spidery handwriting. The earliest was from 1963. Her hands shook as she examined photo after photo, decade after decade of surveillance. Then she saw it, a Polaroid that was clearly more recent. A woman with dark hair sitting by a window, her rounded belly visible in profile. Clara's breath caught. The woman looked exactly like her. Fascinating collection, isn't it? Clara spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs. Dr. Holbrook stood at the bottom of the stairs, no longer the kindly physician who had welcomed her. His eyes held a cold intelligence that made her skin crawl. "You're not a doctor," she managed to say. "Oh, but I am. Just not the kind you were hoping for." He stepped closer, and Clara backed against the specimen wall. Dr. Marcus Holbrook, formerly of Johns Hopkins, until they discovered my unconventional research methods. What do you want with me? His gaze dropped to her belly. The same thing I've wanted from all of them, to understand the miracle of human development, to push the boundaries of what's possible. Clara's mind raced through everything she'd observed, the mansion's isolation, the too convenient breakdown, the lack of cell service. You brought me here. The car trouble wasn't an accident. A simple electromagnetic pulse device hidden along the highway, very effective on modern vehicles with their sensitive electronics. He smiled with the pride of a professor explaining a successful experiment. I've been perfecting the technique for years. Those other women in the photos, what happened to them? They contributed to science. Each pregnancy taught me something new about fetal development, about the delicate balance of hormones and nutrients required for optimal growth. His voice took on an almost reverent tone. Did you know that extreme stress actually accelerates certain developmental markers? Fascinating. The jars seemed to leer at her from their shelves. You killed them. I studied them. Death was merely an unfortunate side effect of discovery. He pulled a syringe from his pocket. But you, Clara, you're special. Your blood work shows remarkable hormone levels. Your child will be perfect for my research. Clara's grip tightened on the flashlight. How do you know my name? How do you know anything about my blood? Dr. Peterson has been most cooperative. A few financial incentives, and he's kept me informed about all his most interesting patients. When he told me about your condition, your lack of support system, I knew you were perfect. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. Her own doctor, the man she'd trusted with her most intimate concerns, had sold her out. The prenatal vitamins, enhanced with mild sedatives and tracking compounds. I needed to monitor your location and ensure you'd be compliant when the time came. His smile turned predatory. The stress of your situation was an added bonus. Fear does such interesting things to fetal brain development. Clara realized with horror that every aspect of her life had been orchestrated. Her isolation, her desperation, even her decision to drive this particular route, all of it had been manipulated to bring her here. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt my baby. Oh, my dear, I'm not going to hurt your baby. I'm going to help it achieve its full potential. He stepped closer, syringe raised. This will just help you relax. Fighting will only increase the cortisol levels, and we want to minimize variables. Clara's thumb found the flashlight switch. In one swift motion, she clicked it off, plunging the basement into absolute darkness. She heard Holbrook curse, then the sound of his feet shuffling on the stone floor. Moving as quietly as possible, she edged along the wall, feeling for the stairs. Her fingers brushed against glass jars, and she had to bite back a scream. Behind her, she could hear Holbrook moving methodically through the darkness, his breathing steady and calm. There's nowhere to run, Clara. His voice echoed through the basement. The mansion is locked down. Even if you reach the surface, you're miles from anywhere, with no transportation. Her foot found the bottom step. As she began to climb, a hand grabbed her ankle. The basement stretched deeper than Maya had imagined possible, carved chambers branching off like the roots of some ancient tree. Each room held more evidence of Dr. Whitmore's obsession, filing cabinets filled with genetic profiles, photographs of pregnant women spanning decades, and detailed charts tracking bloodlines back generations. But it was the final chamber that made her blood freeze. Glass containers lined the walls, each filled with a pale yellow fluid. Floating inside were tissue samples, organs, and things she couldn't identify. Labels bore dates going back 30 years, along with clinical notations in Whitmore precise handwriting. Subject 7, liver tissue, anomalous cellular structure. Subject 12, cardiac muscle, enhanced regenerative properties. Subject 23, neural tissue, unprecedented development rate. Maya's hands trembled as she read the labels, counting 27 containers in total. 27 women who had come before her, led to this mansion by the same desperate hope that had driven her here. Behind her, footsteps echoed on the metal stairs. "I wondered when you'd find your way down here." Dr. Whitmore's voice carried a note of resignation, though I had hoped it wouldn't be necessary. Maya spun around, clutching the journal against her chest. The doctor stood at the base of the stairs, no longer the kindly benefactor who had welcomed her. His face held the cold calculation of a researcher studying a particularly interesting specimen. "These women," Maya whispered, gesturing at the containers. "What did you do to them?" "I helped them, just as I'm helping you." He moved closer, and she noticed the syringe in his hand. Each one came here carrying something extraordinary, though they didn't know it. Genetics is a fascinating field, Maya. Sometimes the most remarkable traits skip generations, hiding in the shadows until the right circumstances bring them to light. "You're insane." "Am I?" His laugh was bitter. "I've dedicated my life to understanding human potential. Do you know what your bloodline carries? What your child will inherit?" He pulled out a folder thick with documentation. "Your great-grandmother survived a plague that killed thousands. Your grandmother lived to 103 with the cognitive abilities of a woman half her age. Your mother, before the accident, showed remarkable resistance to genetic diseases that should have been fatal." Maya backed against the wall, the cold glass of the containers pressing against her shoulders. "That doesn't give you the right." "The right? I'm preserving something miraculous. Your child carries genetic markers I've only seen in 3 other bloodlines, each one capable of advancing human evolution by centuries." His eyes gleamed with fanatic fervor. "But the traits only manifest under specific conditions: stress, isolation, the right combination of hormones and environmental factors." Understanding crashed over her like ice water. "The mansion, the isolation, you've been manipulating everything. Creating optimal conditions, yes. The stress hormones you've produced, the unique environment, your body's adaptive responses. They're all triggering genetic expressions that would normally remain dormant." He raised the syringe. "We're so close now. The child you carry could hold the key to eliminating genetic disease, extending human lifespan, enhancing cognitive capacity beyond current limitations. By murdering me like you did the others, I saved what mattered. Their contribution to humanity's future." Maya threw herself sideways as he lunged forward with the syringe. Glass crashed around her as she knocked over one of the containers, pale fluid spreading across the floor. She scrambled toward another exit she'd spotted at the far end of the chamber, but Whitmore was faster than his age suggested. His hand caught her arm, spinning her around. The syringe gleamed inches from her neck. "Please," she gasped. "There has to be another way." "There is no other way." The mask of scientific calm finally slipped, revealing the desperate madness beneath. 40 years of research, 40 years of finding the right candidates, and you're the closest I've come to a breakthrough. I won't let you walk away from humanity's future." Maya's free hand found the journal, still clutched against her chest. With all her strength, she drove its corner upward, catching him under the chin. His head snapped back, the syringe flying from his grasp. She ran. Behind her, Whitmore's shouts echoed through the chambers, but she didn't look back. The basement was a maze, but her desperate flight carried her through corridors lined with more horrors: surgical equipment, restraints, detailed anatomical drawings that made her stomach lurch. She found a different staircase, older and narrower than the one she'd descended. It led up through darkness, the walls changing from concrete to stone to rough earth. Her lungs burned, her legs shook, but she kept climbing until she emerged through a hidden door concealed behind tapestries in the mansion's library. The house felt different now. No longer a sanctuary, but a trap closing around her. Every shadow could hide cameras, every doorway might lead to another of Whitmore's chambers. She had to get out, had to reach the outside world before... The front door slammed shut with a resonance that shook the entire mansion. Whitmore's voice echoed from speakers, hidden throughout the house. "There's nowhere to run, Maya. The house won't let you leave. Not yet." The wooden steps groaned under their combined weight as they descended into absolute darkness. Sarah's phone flashlight carved a narrow beam through the suffocating blackness, revealing rough stone walls that glistened with moisture. The air grew colder with each step, carrying the metallic scent of rust and something far worse, decay. Marcus's breathing was labored behind her, his injured shoulder making every movement painful. But he pressed on, driven by the same desperate need for answers that propelled Sarah forward. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing the malevolent energy that seemed to pulse from the depths below. "How far down does this go?" Sarah whispered, her voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. "I don't know," Marcus replied, his words tight with pain. "But whatever's down here, Eleanor went to great lengths to hide it." The staircase ended abruptly at a heavy metal door, its surface pitted with age and corrosion. Sarah's trembling fingers found a handle, cold as ice against her palm. The door opened with a prolonged shriek that echoed through the chamber beyond. Her flashlight beam swept across the room, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The space was larger than she'd expected, a natural cavern that had been partially excavated and reinforced with concrete walls. But it was what filled the cavern that made her stomach lurch. Dozens of glass containers lined metal shelving units that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each jar contained what appeared to be specimens floating in murky preservative fluid. But as Sarah moved closer, the horrifying truth became clear. They weren't specimens. They were babies. "Oh, God," Marcus breathed, his face pale in the phone's glow. What kind of monster was she? Sarah's legs nearly gave out as she stared at the grotesque collection. Some jars contained fully formed infants, their tiny features perfectly preserved in death. Others held smaller forms, fetuses in various stages of development. The dates on the labels spanned decades, going back to the 1960s. But it was the newest section that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. Fresh labels, recent dates, and jars that were still warm to the touch. This wasn't some historical horror, it was ongoing. "She's been collecting them," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "All these years, she's been harvesting them." Marcus stumbled to a workstation in the corner, where journals lay open beside surgical instruments that gleamed with recent use. His good hand flipped through pages of meticulous notes, his expression growing more horrified with each entry. "Listen to this," he said, his voice shaking. "Subject 47 showed excellent development until week 32. Extracted successfully. Preservation complete. The collection grows stronger." He looked up at Sarah. "She's been luring pregnant women here for decades." Sarah's mind raced as pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The GPS malfunction that led her here, the perfectly maintained mansion in the middle of nowhere, Eleanor's insistence that she stay, that she was special. It had all been carefully orchestrated. "The other women," Sarah said, backing away from the shelves. "All those missing persons reports. They came here, didn't they?" Marcus nodded grimly, still reading from the journal. "According to this, she targets women in crisis, desperate, alone. Women who won't be immediately missed." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "Women like you." A sound from above froze them both. Footsteps on the wooden floors overhead, slow and deliberate. Eleanor had returned. "We have to go," Sarah whispered urgently. But Marcus was staring at something else in the journal, his face ashen. "Sarah, look at this." He held up a photograph tucked between the pages. It showed a younger Eleanor standing beside a man in a white coat, both smiling proudly in front of what appeared to be a medical facility. Dr. Eleanor Blackwood and Dr. Richard Blackwood, 1961. Fertility Research Division. "She's a doctor," Sarah realized. "This whole thing, it's some twisted research project." The footsteps above grew closer, accompanied by Eleanor's voice calling out in that same sickeningly sweet tone. "Sarah, dear, where are you? It's time for your examination." Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. "There has to be another way out. These old houses always had multiple exits from the cellars." They moved deeper into the cavern, Sarah's flashlight revealing a narrow passage that disappeared into darkness. Behind them, they could hear Eleanor's voice growing more agitated, her calls becoming demands. As they squeezed through the passage, Sarah felt a sharp pain in her abdomen, a contraction that made her gasp and stumble. The stress, the horror, everything was taking its toll. The baby was coming, whether she was ready or not. "Marcus," she whispered, gripping his arm. "I think—" Another contraction, stronger this time, cut off her words. In the distance they could hear Eleanor's voice echoing through the chamber, no longer sweet but filled with cold fury. "You can't escape, Sarah. This is your destiny. Your baby belongs to the collection." The passage ahead split into multiple tunnels, each disappearing into impenetrable darkness. Sarah doubled over as another contraction hit, knowing with terrifying certainty that time was running out. The golden sand shifted beneath Sarah's trembling hands as she clawed deeper into the pit, her pregnant belly pressing against the earth's edge. Each scoop revealed more bones, more fragments of lives that had ended in this cursed place. The moonlight cast eerie shadows across the collection of skulls that stared back at her with hollow sockets. 23, she whispered, counting the distinct remains. 23 women. Behind her, Marcus emerged from the mansion's depths, his face pale and drawn. In his hands, he carried a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "Sarah, you need to see this." She hauled herself up from the pit, dirt clinging to her swollen form. The baby kicked frantically, as if sensing the horror surrounding them. Marcus opened the journal, and by the pale light, Sarah read entries dating back decades. Elena Vasquez, age 24, 7 months pregnant. Arrived October 15, 1987. Marcus's voice cracked as he read. Maria Santos, age 19, 6 months pregnant. Arrived March 3, 1992. Dr. Reeves, Sarah breathed, the name bitter on her tongue. He's been doing this for 40 years. A photograph slipped from between the journal's pages, fluttering to the sand. Sarah picked it up, her blood running cold. It showed a younger Dr. Reeves standing beside a woman in a hospital gown, her belly distended with pregnancy. Behind them, medical equipment gleamed in a sterile white room, but it was the woman's eyes that haunted Sarah, wide with terror, pleading silently with the camera. "There's more," Marcus said grimly. He led her back toward the mansion, where warm light still spilled from the windows in mockery of the evil within. "I found his real laboratory. It's not just about the babies, Sarah. He's been experimenting with something else." They descended through a hidden door behind the kitchen pantry, down stone steps that seemed to plunge into the earth's core. The air grew thick and medicinal, tinged with the metallic scent of blood and antiseptic. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh white relief. The laboratory stretched before them like a nightmare made manifest. Glass containers lined the walls, filled with floating specimens that Sarah's mind refused to process. Computer monitors displayed data streams of genetic sequences, hormone levels and development charts. At the center of it all stood an operating table, its leather restraints darkened with decades of use. Neural tissue transplantation, Marcus read from a computer screen, his voice hollow. Consciousness transfer protocols, memory extraction, and implantation. Sarah's knees buckled. The baby she carried wasn't just intended for adoption, it was meant to be a vessel. Dr. Reeves wasn't just stealing children, he was harvesting their developing minds for something far more sinister. A manila folder lay open on a nearby desk, Sarah's name printed across the tab. Inside, detailed medical charts tracked her entire pregnancy, but they extended into the future. Planned procedures, extraction dates, and at the bottom, in Dr. Reeves's careful handwriting, subject demonstrates optimal neural plasticity. Consciousness transfer scheduled for lunar maximum, tomorrow night. "We have to get out of here," Sarah gasped, but even as she spoke, the lights flickered, then died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. Somewhere above them, footsteps echoed through the mansion's halls. Not one set, but many. They'd returned. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand. pulling her toward what looked like a service tunnel at the laboratory's far end. But as they reached it, metal bars slammed down with a resounding clang, trapping them inside. Dr. Reeves's voice crackled through hidden speakers, calm and measured. "I'm disappointed, Sarah. I thought you understood the honor being bestowed upon you. Your child will live forever, consciousness preserved in a form that transcends mortal limitations." "You're insane!" Sarah screamed at the ceiling. "Am I? I've conquered death itself. The women who came before you, their children now carry the minds of history's greatest thinkers, preserved and enhanced. Your baby will house the consciousness of someone far more valuable than any ordinary person could ever become." The laboratory began to fill with gas, sweet and cloying. Sarah recognized it from her first night, the same substance that had made her sleep so deeply. Her vision began to blur, but she fought against the encroaching darkness. Marcus collapsed first, his hands slipping from hers. Sarah sank to her knees, her free hand protective over her belly. As consciousness faded, she felt the baby moving frantically within her, fighting against the chemical invasion just as desperately as she was. The last thing she saw before the world went black was Dr. Reeves entering the laboratory, flanked by his helpers, surgical instruments gleaming in their hands. The golden sands beneath the mansion's foundation had turned crimson in the artificial light. Sarah pressed her back against the cold stone wall, her pregnant belly tight with fear as she watched Marcus circle the ritual chamber like a predator savoring his final hunt. "You understand now, don't you?" His voice echoed off the ancient walls carved with symbols that seemed to writhe in the flickering torchlight. "Why I needed you specifically, why I waited so long to find the right vessel." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to protect her unborn child. The baby had been restless all day, as if sensing the approaching danger. Now she knew why the mansion had felt so wrong, why every comfort had come with an invisible price. "The women before me," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind that howled through hidden passages. "They were all pregnant." Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his handsome features into something monstrous. 7 generations of my family have maintained the covenant. Every 33 years the entity requires an offering, a life not yet born, untainted by the world above." He gestured to the intricate circle carved into the floor, its grooves stained dark with decades of use. "In return, our bloodline prospers, wealth, power, influence, all possible because of what lies beneath." The realization hit Sarah like ice water. "You've been watching me for months. The breakdown, the eviction notice, even Jake leaving." Her legs nearly gave out as the full scope of his manipulation became clear. "I orchestrate circumstances, I provide opportunities." Marcus began lighting candles around the circle's perimeter, each flame casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently. "Your desperation made you compliant, grateful even, so much easier than force." Sarah edged along the wall, searching for any exit besides the stone steps they'd descended. The chamber felt ancient, predating the mansion above by centuries. "The other women fought you." "Some did. Others went willingly when they understood the alternative." His eyes glinted with cruel amusement. "Would you prefer I tell you what happened to your predecessor? How she begged for her child's life even as the sand consumed them both?" The baby kicked hard, as if responding to the threat. Sarah bit back a cry of pain and continued moving, her fingers trailing along the rough stone. There had to be another way out. The wind was coming from somewhere. "The entity grows impatient," Marcus continued, pulling a ceremonial blade from his coat. The metal gleamed with an oily sheen that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "It's been restless since you arrived, sensing what you carry. Soon it will have what it craves, and I will have secured another generation of prosperity." "What about your own children?" Sarah's voice cracked with desperation. "Don't you have kids of your own?" Marcus paused, something flickering across his face. "The covenant protects only direct bloodline. My son and daughter live in New York, blessed with success they'll never question. This is the price of their happiness." Sarah's fingers found a gap in the stones, a narrow opening that breathed cool air, not large enough to escape through, but perhaps. She gripped a loose stone and worked it free as quietly as possible. 33 years ago, I stood where you stand now, Marcus said, approaching the altar at the circle's center. My father explained the family obligation as his father had explained it to him. The woman then was barely older than you. She had such hope when she first arrived. You were just a child. Sarah tried to appeal to whatever humanity might remain in him. I was old enough to understand necessity. He set the blade on the altar and began chanting in a language that hurt Sarah's ears. The very air seemed to thicken, pressing against her skin like invisible hands. The stones beneath their feet began to vibrate. Sand started trickling through cracks in the walls, and somewhere far below, something vast stirred in response to Marcus's words. The entity he'd spoken of was real, and it was waking. Sarah hefted the stone she'd pried loose, knowing she'd have only one chance. The baby moved again, stronger now, as if lending her courage. She thought of all the women who'd stood in this chamber before her, all the children who'd never drawn breath because of this family's greed. Marcus raised the ceremonial blade above his head, his chanting reaching a crescendo. The wind through the hidden passages grew to a howl, and the sand began falling in earnest, creating small dunes in the chamber's corners. Now, Marcus shouted over the growing noise, the covenant must be renewed. Sarah stepped forward as if surrendering, then hurled the stone with all her strength. It struck Marcus's temple with a sickening crack, sending him sprawling. The blade clattered across the floor, its metal ringing against stone. But the damage was done. Far beneath the golden sands, something ancient and hungry had awakened, and it would not return to sleep without payment. The desert wind howled through the collapsed sections of the mansion as Sarah clutched her newborn daughter against her chest. The pristine walls had crumbled like a house of cards, revealing the rotted infrastructure beneath, wooden beams crawling with termites, pipes corroded beyond recognition, and foundations that had been slowly sinking into the sand for decades. Eleanor Blackwood stood in the doorway, no longer the composed matriarch, but a wild-eyed woman whose carefully constructed illusion had finally shattered. Her perfectly styled hair hung in disheveled strands, and her elegant dress was torn and stained with the dark earth she'd clawed at in her desperation to reach the buried chamber below. You don't understand, Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. She was everything to me, my Caroline. She was supposed to be safe here, supposed to grow up and carry on the family name. But the desert took her, just like it takes everything. Sarah pressed herself against what remained of a stable wall, her baby daughter stirring restlessly in her arms. Through the gaping holes in the floor, she could see into the underground chamber where Eleanor had kept Caroline's mummified remains for 30 years, surrounded by toys and children's clothing, preserved in the dry desert air like some macabre dollhouse. You led me here, Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. The road signs, the convenience store clerk, the gas station attendant, they were all working for you. Eleanor's laugh was hollow and broken. I gave them purpose, just like I was trying to give you purpose. Do you know what it's like to watch your child waste away from fever while the nearest hospital is hundreds of miles away? To hold her as she takes her last breath, knowing you failed as a mother? The baby in Sarah's arms began to cry, and Eleanor's eyes fixed on the sound with an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl. The older woman took a step forward, and Sarah noticed the heavy iron candlestick clutched in her weathered hands. I can protect her, Eleanor continued, her voice taking on the sing-song quality of someone who had lost touch with reality long ago. I can keep her safe from the world, from all the terrible things that happen to little girls. She'll never have to grow up and disappoint anyone. She'll never have to feel pain or loss or heartbreak. That's not protection, Sarah said firmly, edging toward what had once been a window. That's not love. Caroline deserved to live her life, and my daughter deserves the same chance. The desert outside was vast and unforgiving, but Sarah knew it was their only hope of escape. The Land Rover she'd arrived in was buried under a collapsed beam, but Eleanor's vehicle might still be accessible if she could reach it. Eleanor's face contorted with rage and grief. "You think you know better? You think the world out there is kind? I've watched it through my cameras for 30 years, watched it grow more cruel and violent with each passing day. This place is a sanctuary. This place is a tomb," Sarah replied, then bolted toward the window. Eleanor lunged forward with surprising speed for her age, the candlestick whistling through the air where Sarah's head had been moments before. But Sarah was younger, motivated by maternal instinct and desperate in a way that only a mother protecting her child could be. She tumbled through the window frame, rolling in the sand to protect her baby from the impact. Behind her, she could hear Eleanor screaming, a sound that seemed to blend with the desert wind until it became something inhuman. Sarah ran across the moonlit dunes toward the garage, her bare feet sliding in the loose sand. Her daughter's cries spurred her forward, reminding her that 2 lives depended on her escape. The garage door was unlocked, and Eleanor's pristine Mercedes sat waiting like a silver ghost in the darkness. The keys were in the ignition, another sign of how completely isolated Eleanor's world had become. As the engine roared to life, Sarah saw the older woman emerge from the ruined mansion, silhouetted against the starry sky like something from a nightmare. But Sarah was already speeding away, following the same hidden road that had brought her to this place. In her rearview mirror, she watched Eleanor standing motionless in the sand, growing smaller until she disappeared entirely into the darkness. Miles later, when she finally reached the main highway and saw the lights of civilization ahead, Sarah allowed herself to weep, for Caroline, for Eleanor's twisted grief, and for the realization of how close she had come to losing everything that mattered. Her daughter slept peacefully now, unaware of the danger they had escaped. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah drove toward a future that was uncertain but undeniably alive with possibility. Behind them, the mansion continued its slow surrender to the sand, taking its secrets with it into the depths where forgotten things belonged.